Political interference in the justice system is one of the most pressing concerns for any democracy, and the case of a U.S. attorney resigning after being pressured by Trump officials to bring false charges against the New York Attorney General shows how deep and damaging such interference can be. The justice system is meant to operate independently, free from political agendas and free from the manipulation of powerful individuals who wish to bend the law to serve their own interests. When politics enters the courtroom, the principles of fairness, accountability, and equal treatment under the law are threatened. This case highlights how leaders, when given unchecked power, may attempt to weaponize justice, not to protect citizens or uphold the Constitution, but to silence critics and eliminate political rivals. The justice system in the United States was built with the idea that it should function as a neutral and impartial guardian of the rule of law. Prosecutors are supposed to base their actions on facts, evidence, and legal standards, not on political motivations or orders from government officials. But when politicians attempt to influence prosecutors, it undermines the very foundation of justice. In this case, Trump officials allegedly pressured a U.S. attorney to fabricate charges against the New York Attorney General. Such an attempt to misuse legal authority is an attack not only on the AG but on the credibility of the justice system itself. It suggests that political power could determine who gets investigated and who is shielded, not the truth or the evidence. Political interference also sends a chilling message to all public servants who work in the legal system. Prosecutors, judges, investigators, and attorneys may feel that their professional decisions are being closely watched and possibly manipulated by political figures. This weakens morale and creates fear that doing the right thing could cost them their jobs or reputations. In the situation where the U.S. attorney chose to resign, it demonstrated courage and resistance to political pressure, but it also revealed how difficult it is for officials to carry out their duties when interference is constant. For many, resigning may not even be an option, and they might feel forced to comply with unlawful or unethical demands, which further corrupts the system. The damage of political interference goes beyond the individuals directly involved. It erodes public trust in the justice system as a whole. Citizens expect prosecutors to be fair and impartial, applying the law equally regardless of wealth, influence, or political connections. When people see that prosecutions or investigations may be politically motivated, they lose faith that justice will be applied fairly. This lack of trust is extremely dangerous for a democracy, because if citizens no longer believe in the fairness of the courts or law enforcement, they may lose confidence in the government itself. The idea of justice for all becomes hollow when citizens think justice only applies if you are on the right political side. In this particular case, the attempted interference was aimed at targeting the New York Attorney General, who had been investigating Trump and his business dealings. By trying to force bogus charges against her, the officials involved were attempting to discredit her, weaken her authority, and distract from the investigations she was pursuing. This shows clearly how political interference is often self-serving. It is not about protecting the nation or its people but about shielding certain individuals from accountability while punishing those who stand in their way. If such interference had succeeded, it would have set a dangerous precedent where those in power could direct the justice system against their enemies and protect their allies, essentially turning justice into a political weapon. The consequences of this kind of interference are long-lasting. It creates a culture where future leaders may believe they too can pressure prosecutors for political gain. Once the boundaries of independence are crossed, it becomes increasingly difficult to restore them. History shows us that countries where justice systems are controlled by political leaders often suffer from corruption, abuse of power, and a lack of accountability. The United States, with its tradition of checks and balances, is supposed to prevent such abuses, but cases like this prove that the system can be tested and weakened when individuals in power disregard democratic norms. Another aspect of political interference is the message it sends internationally. The United States often presents itself as a global example of democracy and rule of law, but when stories like this emerge, it damages the country's reputation. Other nations may use such incidents to argue that America's justice system is no different from those of less democratic states where leaders control judges and prosecutors. This weakens the United States' ability to advocate for human rights, anti-corruption, and judicial independence abroad. It becomes difficult to criticize other governments when political interference at home becomes so visible. The resignation of the U.S. attorney in this case also illustrates the personal cost of standing up against political interference. Choosing to resign rather than follow unlawful orders is an honorable decision, but it also leaves a gap in the system. When good people leave, it creates opportunities for less principled individuals to take their place, people who may be more willing to bend to political pressure. Over time, this could transform the justice system from one that resists interference into one that accepts it as normal. This gradual shift is often how institutions lose their independence, not through one dramatic change but through repeated smaller compromises. Political interference also breeds polarization in society. Supporters of the political figures attempting to interfere may justify the actions, claiming they are necessary or that the justice system itself is biased. Opponents will see the interference as proof of corruption and authoritarian tendencies. This deepens the divisions in the country, making it harder to find common ground or build consensus on how justice should be served. When justice becomes partisan, citizens stop agreeing on basic facts and principles, and the legal system loses its role as a neutral arbiter. Integrity and independence of U.S. attorneys are central to the credibility of the American justice system, and without them, the foundation of law enforcement begins to crumble. U.S. attorneys are appointed to serve as the chief federal law enforcement officers in their districts, carrying the responsibility of prosecuting federal crimes, defending the government in civil cases, and ensuring that justice is carried out fairly and impartially. Their duty is not to political parties, presidents, or powerful figures, but to the Constitution, the rule of law, and the people of the United States. The moment their independence is compromised, justice becomes vulnerable to manipulation, and the public loses faith in its ability to function as intended. This makes integrity and independence not optional qualities but absolute necessities for anyone serving in such a position. The independence of U.S. attorneys ensures that decisions about prosecutions, investigations, and legal strategies are made based on evidence, facts, and legal standards rather than on political agendas or personal vendettas. They are supposed to operate free from interference by politicians, no matter how powerful those politicians may be. The reason this independence is so crucial is because the justice system is meant to serve everyone equally, not just those in power. Without independent prosecutors, political leaders could pressure them into targeting opponents or shielding allies, creating a justice system that punishes enemies and protects friends rather than one that delivers impartial justice. In a democracy that values fairness, that kind of system is unacceptable. Integrity is equally important, because independence alone means little if those in charge cannot be trusted to uphold their responsibilities honestly. U.S. attorneys are entrusted with enormous discretion and power, including the ability to decide whether to bring charges, what charges to file, how to allocate resources, and whether to pursue investigations that may involve politically sensitive figures. If they lack integrity, they could abuse this power, either by targeting individuals unfairly or by allowing powerful people to escape accountability. Integrity means having the courage to make difficult decisions that may anger powerful people but are in line with the law and principles of justice. It also means refusing to compromise when pressured to act in ways that undermine the legal system. The case of the U.S. attorney who resigned after being pressured by Trump officials to bring bogus charges against the New York Attorney General highlights exactly why integrity and independence are indispensable. Here was a situation in which the prosecutor faced a direct test of his commitment to the principles of justice. On one side was political pressure from officials connected to the president, demanding that he act not based on law or evidence but on a political agenda to discredit a state attorney general. On the other side was his duty to uphold the law, maintain his integrity, and refuse to be used as a political tool. His decision to resign rather than give in demonstrates how central independence and integrity are to the justice system, because if he had caved to that pressure, the consequences would have been far-reaching. The public perception of prosecutors depends heavily on the belief that they act independently. If citizens begin to suspect that U.S. Attorneys are simply extensions of whichever political party holds power. Their trust in the entire justice system collapses. That is why integrity is not just a personal quality but a societal safeguard. Every time a prosecutor demonstrates integrity, even at personal cost, they help strengthen public confidence that the system is still capable of functioning fairly. Conversely, every time a prosecutor fails to act independently and allows political influence to guide their decisions, it creates doubts that are hard to erase. Once citizens lose faith, rebuilding that trust is extremely difficult, and it may take years of consistent independence to restore it. The importance of independence is also reflected in the broader system of checks and balances. U.S. attorneys are part of the executive branch, but their professional culture and ethical obligations demand they act with autonomy in legal matters. This balance is delicate. Presidents do have the authority to appoint and remove them, but that authority was never meant to extend into dictating prosecutorial decisions on specific cases for political purposes. When that line is crossed, the justice system becomes politicized, and independence is destroyed. The Constitution does not explicitly spell out every protection for prosecutorial independence, but the principle is embedded in the traditions and norms that have guided the justice system for generations. It is these traditions, combined with personal integrity, that protect the justice system from becoming a tool of political power. Integrity also matters on a personal and professional level for the attorneys themselves. Their careers and reputations depend on the perception that they act with honesty, fairness, and respect for the law. A U.S. attorney who allows political pressure to dictate their decisions not only weakens the justice system but also tarnishes their own legacy. They may achieve short-term gains by pleasing powerful officials, but in the long run, they will be remembered as individuals who failed to uphold the highest standards of their office. On the other hand, those who refuse to compromise, even when it costs them their position, are often remembered as defenders of justice who put principle above politics. This difference underscores why integrity is not just an ideal but a professional necessity. The independence of U.S. attorneys also protects against the concentration of power in the executive branch. Without independent prosecutors, a president could effectively use the justice system to silence critics, intimidate opponents, and reward allies. This would shift the balance of power away from a system of shared governance and toward authoritarianism. Independent prosecutors serve as a barrier to such abuses, ensuring that the law is applied fairly even to the most powerful individuals. This role becomes even more important during times of political division, when trust in institutions is already fragile. By standing firm against political influence, prosecutors can help maintain stability and protect the integrity of the democratic process. Independence also allows prosecutors to pursue cases that may be politically unpopular but necessary for the rule of law. For example, cases involving corruption, abuse of power, or misconduct by influential figures are often met with resistance, but independent prosecutors must be able to pursue them without fear of retaliation. Integrity is what gives them the strength to follow through on these difficult cases. Without it, many crimes committed by those in positions of power would never come to light, and the principle that no one is above the law would be meaningless. Threats to democracy when power is misused are among the gravest dangers faced by any society that claims to value freedom, equality, and the rule of law. Democracy is built on a delicate system of checks and balances, designed to ensure that no single branch of government or individual can dominate the entire structure. However, when those entrusted with power decide to misuse it, this system begins to crack. Misuse of power can take many forms, including pressuring independent officials to act for political gain, undermining legal institutions, silencing critics, or bending laws to protect allies. Each of these actions chips away at the foundation of democracy, turning a government that is supposed to serve the people into one that serves the interests of a few. In the United States, democracy relies heavily on the independence of institutions such as the judiciary, the Department of Justice, and the offices of U.S. attorneys. These entities are supposed to operate outside of partisan influence, making decisions based on evidence and law rather than political agendas. When political officials attempt to pressure prosecutors into filing bogus charges or dropping legitimate cases, they are misusing power in a way that threatens the democratic system. The resignation of a U.S. attorney after being pressured by Trump officials to bring false charges against the New York Attorney General illustrates exactly how dangerous such interference can be. It demonstrates that the misuse of power is not an abstract concept but a real and immediate threat to the functioning of democracy. One of the most damaging effects of power misuse is the erosion of public trust. Democracy depends on citizens believing that the system is fair, transparent, and accountable. When people begin to see that political leaders can manipulate institutions for their own benefit, they lose confidence in the system's ability to deliver justice. Without trust, citizens may withdraw from participation, stop voting, or even begin to question the legitimacy of democratic governance altogether. Once lost, this trust is extremely difficult to restore, and the perception of corruption can linger for generations, weakening the very spirit of democratic engagement. Another threat comes from the precedent set when powerful figures misuse their authority without facing consequences. Each time such misuse goes unchecked, it becomes easier for future leaders to follow the same path. What begins as an isolated incident can quickly evolve into a pattern, and over time, this pattern becomes normalized. Citizens may even begin to expect that leaders will misuse their power, leading to a culture where corruption is tolerated rather than resisted. In such an environment, democracy loses its meaning, because laws are no longer applied equally, and institutions no longer serve the people but serve those in control. The misuse of power also directly undermines accountability. In a healthy democracy, leaders are subject to oversight, and independent institutions ensure that no one is above the law. When those in power manipulate these institutions, accountability disappears. Investigations into misconduct may be blocked, evidence may be suppressed, and charges may be fabricated to harm opponents. This creates a double standard in which the powerful are shielded while critics are punished. Such a system does not reflect democracy but authoritarianism, where power protects itself at the expense of justice. A further consequence of misusing power is the deepening of political polarization. When one side of the political spectrum sees leaders using their authority to target opponents, they interpret it as corruption and authoritarian behavior. On the other side, supporters may justify or even celebrate the misuse of power if it benefits their party or leader. This division makes it harder for citizens to unite around common democratic values, because the very definition of fairness becomes partisan. The justice system, which should serve as a neutral arbiter, is dragged into political battles, losing its credibility with large portions of the population. The end result is a fragmented society where trust in democratic institutions is replaced with loyalty to political factions. Internationally, the misuse of power within a democracy like the United States has serious ripple effects. America has long portrayed itself as a global leader in defending democracy and human rights, often urging other countries to strengthen their institutions and prevent corruption. However, when misuse of power occurs at home, it undermines the credibility of such efforts abroad. Authoritarian governments can point to incidents of political interference and claim that democracy itself is hypocritical, weakening the global fight for democratic values. In this way, the misuse of power not only threatens domestic stability but also diminishes the country's influence and moral authority worldwide. Another danger is the silencing of dissent. In a functioning democracy, critics, journalists, activists, and opposition figures play a vital role in holding leaders accountable. But when those in power misuse their authority, they often target dissenters with harassment, investigations, or false charges. This creates a climate of fear, discouraging individuals from speaking out or challenging authority. Over time, public debate shrinks, and the range of acceptable opinions narrows, leaving only the voices approved by those in power. Without open debate and criticism, democracy cannot survive, because it relies on a diversity of perspectives and the ability of citizens to challenge their leaders. The misuse of power also has a corrosive effect on future leaders and public servants. When they witness powerful officials bending institutions for personal gain, they may become cynical, believing that integrity and fairness no longer matter in government service. This discourages people with strong moral principles from entering public office or serving in institutions like the Department of Justice. Instead, it attracts individuals who are willing to prioritize loyalty and personal advancement over the rule of law. Over time, this weakens the quality of leadership and creates a cycle where misuse of power becomes not only tolerated but expected. Financial and social costs also emerge when power is misused. Investigations based on false charges waste taxpayer money and consume resources that could be used to address real issues like crime, economic inequality, or public safety. Moreover, communities that already feel marginalized or unfairly targeted may see misuse of power as confirmation that the system is stacked against them. This deepens existing divides and contributes to social unrest. People may take to the streets in protest, leading to instability and further straining the relationship between citizens and their government.